Hello everyone, this is Professor Robert Solis. Welcome to this next video lesson. So I thought what would be cool is to create a distance calculator program where the user is going to give you the x and y axis for 2 points. We're going to take those 2 points and we're going to calculate the distance between those two. So in order to do that, we're going to use what's called the distance equation, which is really nothing more than an extension of the Pythagorean theorem. And so we say this, we say d is equal to the difference of the two x-axis points, we're going to square that, plus the distance between the two y-axis points, and then we're going to square that, and then we take that whole thing and we apply the square root. So let's say that the user enters 2, 2, and 6, 9. So I can determine that this is going to be x1, y1, or maybe this is going to be x1, y1. It doesn't matter as long as you are consistent. Once I plug those values in, what I'm going to be calculating is the distance for these 2 points, which as you can see here is marked in red. So let's create a Visual Basic program that does that. So I've already established my Visual Basic program. You see that I have a txt x1 axis, y1 axis, txt x2 axis, txt y2 axis, btn calculate distance, and I also have LBL output. I think what would be nice is if I put these into a group box, and I think I may have mentioned the group box in previous lectures, but I'll do that over here. Let me just go over here to containers, and in the containers section it says group box. So I'll take this group box and I'll just haphazardly copy and paste it over here. In fact, let me just do this. Let me open this form up a little bit so I have a little bit of room to play with this group box, and I'll move it over here. Really what I want to do is I want to put this content into here and group them together. So what I'll do is I'll simply take these, copy, or I should say cut, select this, paste, and then I'll just simply move them in the upper left hand corner of this group box. And now if I move the group box around, you can see the content moves with it as well. It looks a little sloppy to me. Let me take this guy and this guy over here. I'm going to use the arrows on my keyboard, maybe make this a little bit closer. I don't think maybe both of those have to be so close to the upper left-hand corner. So let me select these by holding down the Shift button, and I'll simply use the arrows to move them to a different location. That looks good right there. And I'll just take this over here and close that group box. Take this group box, move it back over here like this. And maybe we should give a different text over here to the group box. We'll say like point 1. So the text will be point 1. Right? Here's the point 1 info. Maybe I should do that. Point 1 info. Obviously I'm going to have to move this guy, so let me just move that down a little bit. Here's the group box for point 1 info. I'll do the same thing for the other 2 items, or other 4 items I should say. I'll just take this group box, move it over here, and I want to take these guys and I'm going to cut, Control X, paste after I select over here, and then I can move them into place. So it looks like, actually no, before I do that, let me change this to point 2. So I'll select that group box and say point 2 info. It looks like that E is right there below the I and before the I and after the O, so I'll select these 2 over here and move it over something like this. I'm just eyeballing it. That looks okay right there. And what do I have for the distance over here? It looks like for the size, this thing is a width of 112. Okay, let me do that over here. Let me change this to a size of 112, 112, enter. And for the height, what is this guy over here? It's 147. Okay, so I'll select this guy over here, and for the height, 147. Is that what I have? 147, yeah, okay. And then I'll just move this into place, something like that. I think it looks a little nicer. You don't have to do that. The idea is that you are visually communicating to the user that this is one group of data, and here's another group of data. And so that's what's really nice about this group box, that you can set aside or establish groups of data, whether they be radio buttons, check boxes, or just simply text boxes that group information. Okay. All right, so I've named all these items. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the button so I can enter the code, but let me get rid of the toolbox by clicking this push pin. Let me get rid of the properties by again also clicking this push pin. I'm going to start off with some comments. So we'll say declarations, get user input, calculation, and of course output. All right, so the thing that I have to do is ask myself the question, what are those items that are being given to me, and what are those things that I need to give back to the user? So I go back over here to the form. Well, it looks like the user is going to have to give me the value for x and y axis for 2 different points. So those are the variables that I will create. I'll go back over here and we'll say dim .1 x value, and we'll use that as a double. Now the reason why I'm using that as a double is, as you'll recall, this is going to be placed into an equation. After I square something and square root, it might end up that I'm going to get a distance that's a double. So since I'm dealing with an answer that has a double, I'll make everything a double. So in a similar fashion, we'll say .1y as double. I think what I'll do is I'll just simply copy and paste these two. So copy and paste, and I'll change this to 2. But first what I'll do is I'll activate this overwrite mode. So I'll double click here where it says insert. We'll turn that to OVR, which is overwrite. So now I can use my arrows and change that to 2 and change that to 2. And then I'll double click on this OVR to go back to insert. Now I'm doing this on a Macintosh. I don't see an insert button, but if you have a Windows PC, you should see an INS button, and that means insert or overwrite toggle, which are basically just you're working with this guy over here. Okay. All right. So now let's get that data. So we'll say .1x. Well, that's going to be coming from the text box, but we have to convert .2double whatever is inside of the text box. So notice what I do. I just type in txt, and then I look to see which value I'm interested in. And the one that I'm interested in is this guy over here, text x1 axis. Don't forget to type in also the property, which is dot text. .1y is going to be convert.toDouble txt y1 axis dot text. So I think I'll just do that copy and paste business again. I'll copy this, paste it over here. Let me go back into this overwrite mode, and I'll just change these guys to 2's. So this is 2 and 2. Over here, this is going to be 2 and 2. And then I'll double click on this overwrite mode to change that back into insert mode. So I've now obtained the data from the user. Now let's perform a calculation. That calculation is this guy over here, where I take the square of these two numbers, the square of these two numbers, I add them, and then I obtain the square root. So what I'm about to type is going to be a pretty long equation, because we're going to be using math.pow to square something. We're going to be using math.sqrt, which is the square root function in Visual Basic. So back over here, I need to determine what the distance is. So let me create one more variable, because I forgot to mention to you, what is it that you're going to be giving back to the user? Well, obviously we're going to be giving back the distance to the user. So what I'll do is I'll say dim distance as double. Okay, so now back over here in the calculation section, I can say distance is going to be, now I need to square root the whole thing, as you can see over here. And to square root the whole thing, that's like the outer thing that I need to do. So I'll put math.sq, I don't even have to type anymore, that's it right there. Open and close parentheses, let me put my cursor right back in there. That's the outer thing that I need to do. Now, what is the inner thing that I need to do? Well, it looks like I need to subtract these two and then square them. Okay, so back over here, I'm going to say math dot pow. What pow does, open and close parentheses. So in here, notice that I put a double value over here, a double value over here. Basically, you're putting the base and the exponent. All right, so we want to work with, let's see, according to this equation, it's x2 minus x1. Okay, so I have those values. I have point x, point 1, I should say point 2 rather, x value minus point 1 x value, right? So x2 minus x1, okay? x2 minus x1. But what am I supposed to do with that after I subtract them? I'm supposed to square them. So what I'll do is I'll put a comma over here. Actually, sorry about that. Let me put parens around this guy right here to isolate it. And then I'll put a comma, and then I'll put a 2.0. So let me make sure that I'm keeping track of my parentheses here. So math.pow, that's this guy right here. The subtraction of the 2 points, that takes place right here within these two parens. The comma 2 says take this and raise it to the power of 2. Okay. So now that we've done that, I'm supposed to add, so over here, I'm supposed to add the same thing, the square root, the square of y2 minus y1 quantity squared, but for the y values. So I think what I'll do is I'll just simply copy and paste this guy right here. Copy and paste. But I have to change those to y. So I'll double click INS to make that overwrite. And that's y. And this is also supposed to be y. Double click on INS or overwrite so I can get rid of that. And I think that's it. So I am obtaining the square root, that's this guy over here, of x2 minus x1 squared, x2 minus x1 squared, quantity squared, plus y2 minus y1, quantity squared, y2 minus y1, quantity squared. That gives me the distance. So when you're working with mathematical equations, just make sure that you're doing things step by step. I like to do this. I don't think this was necessary for me to put the parentheses here and here, but when my eyes look at it, I can see clearly that that's a mathematical operation that I'm performing within a power function, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to raise it to 2. So were those parentheses necessary? No. But I like to make my programs as readable as possible. And I would argue that that makes it readable, that you're taking this group, subtracting it, and then you're going to square it. Okay? But you don't have to use that. Okay, well, now that I have the distance, now we just simply output what the value is. So we'll say something like this, lbl.text, and we'll say distance equals, I'm going to concatenate that, whatever the distance is, so we'll say convert to string whatever distance is. So calculate that distance over here, display it to the output. Let's see what happens. So let me run the program. And over here, I have 2, 2, and 6, 9. So this will be 2, 2, and 6, 9. Calculate. Looks like the distance is this.
Is there something between toString and distance, or no?
Is there something between toString and distance?
Oh,
The parentheses? Okay. Did you see how many numbers that we had afterwards? Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I only want a fixed number of digits, right? Let me comment this out. This is like version 1. And I'll copy this. And then that way you have both versions. But instead of using this approach, what I'll do is I'll say distance dot toString, and I'll format this such that there are only 2 numbers after the decimal point. So now let's see what happens. So I'll scroll down here so you can see the change that I made. So this is going to be 2, 2, and this was 6, this was 9. Only 2 numbers after the decimal point, and it will round that value. Okay. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now, another thing that we could have done is we could have actually said the distance from, and then this point, and then to, and then that point equals, and then whatever that distance happens to be. We could have done something like that as well. That'd be a little bit more cumbersome, but we could do that. So let me give you one more version. We'll say LBL output.text. So this one's going to be a little bit more involved. The distance from, and now I need to give whatever that point is for x1. So I'll simply concatenate, and we'll say convert dot to string, whatever the value is for point 1, x, and let me see here. Let me then concatenate that with a comma to separate those two. So we'll say comma like this. And then I'm going to concatenate that with whatever the point 2 is. So we'll convert dot to string point 1 y. And then I'm going to concatenate that with a close parentheses. See, what I want is this. Let me just put a comment. The distance from 1, 1. See, that's what I'm trying to make. That parentheses 1, 1. That's what this is. See the parens right here? This is point 1. Here's the comma. And then here is the value for point 2 for point 1y. And then here we have the closing parens. That's what this is doing. But we're not done yet. Let me concatenate that with the word to. So we'll say 2, and then I'll put an open parens. In fact, what I could have done is I just could have put a close parens here and get rid of this, because that point will have a closing parens 2, and then we'll have this point over here. I think what I'll do is I'll just copy this part right here, because it's really the same thing. I concatenate that. Oops. Paste. But this is point 2. So I go to overwrite. I change that to point 2. Change this to point 2. Get rid of that overwrite. Double click it. Make it insert. And then we'll say is. So I'll concatenate that and say is. Well, actually, before that I do that, I have to close the parens. So closing parens is, and then whatever that distance happens to be. Well, we already solved for that, as you can see from the above code that I commented out. We just put an F2 over here to give me only 2 numbers after the decimal point. So this definitely is a little bit more involved. It took a little bit more thinking about how to display the data. But look what happens as a result of your hard work. When the user enters the data, like this, and then I click this, the distance from 2, 2 to 6, 9 is, and then I have the value. So again, it's up to you how you want to display the data. Do you want to be verbose? Do you want to be general? All those options are up to you. All right, so this is Professor Robert Solis. I hope this video lesson was helpful. Have a good day. See you next time.